Hello, my name is Ed Halloran, and this is the third in a series of insights into the poetry of Robert Frost. Today I'm going to talk about a sonnet that he wrote, and this segment will be a little bit brief in terms of the other two, which were 15 minutes or so, but this will be rather brief. And I'd like to just discuss how he sets up his thesis in this poem. I've been talking about the importance of verse and content, how they go hand in hand. Well, in this particular poem, the title of it is On a Tree Fallen Across a Road. And as soon as you say on it, that's like his topic he's going to discuss. My discussion today is on this topic, so to speak. All right, so a sonnet, if you recall from high school English class, is a 14-line poem, and the rhyme scheme, like the rhyming at the end of each line, creates a pattern, and some are different from others. For example, Shakespeare used one style and Spenser another, and that's not important. But if you're writing a sonnet, you really have to conform to the rules. So that's the only reason I point this out. And the first 8 lines, generally 2 stanzas of 4 lines each, right? They constitute the first half of the sonnet. Sometimes it's like a question, and then the latter 6 lines, because there are 14 lines in the sonnet, the latter 6 take a different stand. For example, it might answer the question posed in the first half, or else there's a shift in the mood, or a shift in the meaning from one part to the other. So that's all I need you to know, and you probably already know that. However, I want you to see how Frost does this. And the second point is that Robert Frost uses nature. Everybody knows that. And unlike some of the romantic poets, especially of the English poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge and so on, they praised nature. They sung her praises, and they looked for things in nature that they could communicate with. William Cullen Bryant says, to him who in the love of nature holds communion with all her visible forms, she speaks a variety of languages. All right, so that would be like a romantic stand. But Frost, on the other hand, uses nature to bring out different aspects of human nature, how we interrelate with nature, and not always in a good way. Consider what happened in Out Out. That wasn't a pleasant little poem at all in terms of nature, things happening. He did use the background, he did use the imagery and sound devices. However, it wasn't like singing the praises of nature. So that's what happens here. He is not going to do that, and instead he sets up a kind of battle between man and nature, because we are always contending with nature, snowstorms, hurricanes, whatever, and we have to deal with that because it's part of our world. Well, that's what happens here. So let me just read the poem, and then see if you can recognize the change after the first 8 lines and then the second 6. Okay, the octave says that. All right, this is the way it goes. The tree, the tempest, with a crash of wood, throws down in front of us, is not to bar our journeys, not to bar our passage to our journey's end for good, but just to ask us who we think we are, insisting always on our own way so. She likes to halt us in our runner tracks and make us get down in a foot of snow, debating what to do without an axe. And yet, she knows obstruction is in vain. We will not be put off the final goal. We have it in us, hidden, to attain, not though we have to seize earth by the pole, and tired of aimless circling in one place, stare straight off after something into space. All right, so the first line, if you're reading this poem for the first time and you come across the first line, it's a little bit confusing because the word order, it says the tree, the tempest. Well, two nouns following each other. Really what he means is the tree, that, the tempest, and the tempest is the storm. The tree, the tempest, with a crash of wood, throws down in front of us, is not to bar our journey, our passage to our journey's end for good, but just to ask us who we think we are. And then the second stanza, insisting always on our own way. So, but the first line, he is saying that the tree that falls across our path as we're traveling along, and it's winter, by the way, the runner tracks, and it's like a sleigh ride, sleigh runner tracks, not tire tracks. It's not to bar us from reaching our journey. We're out, let's say, in the woods, midway between the woods and home, and then all of a sudden we have to get out of the sleigh, in this case, and remove this limb of a tree. So there's the point that I was making earlier, that this is nature, and nature is creating an obstacle for us to deal with. Now, on a larger scale, we would think about a hurricane or a huge snowstorm, blizzard, or something. But in this case, it's a minor thing, and we have to deal with it. Okay, so I like the second stanza, because he's talking again philosophically about mankind. We're always insisting on our own way. We, forget about nature. We can do this. We don't need nature. We can build cities. We can do whatever we want. However, nature likes to knock us down once in a while. And the way he puts it is, she likes to halt us in our runner tracks, and I like this line, and make us get down in a foot of snow, debating what to do now without an axe, because we have to remove this obstacle. And man, gets out of the sleigh and deliberates, uh-oh, what do I do now? How do I deal with this? However, nature knows that man is not going to be put off, because within us we have that incentive or that drive to attain whatever it is that we set out for. Think about, the man on the moon, the Hoover Dam, all the things that man has created. It's unbelievable. Like, how did mankind ever achieve these things? Mankind had it within him to achieve these things, all right? So nothing's going to put us off. And that's what the second part of the sonnet says, the word yet, First part, like it's saying, nature knocks us down. And the second part says, and yet, she knows, nature, she knows obstruction is in vain. We will not be put off our final goal. And this is the line that, is philosophical. We have it in us, to attain, not though we have to seize Earth by the pole and swing it around. No. And tired of aimless circling in one place, stare straight off after something into space. So there's your sonnet. And by the way, generally in a sonnet, the last two lines kind of sum it up, and they're a rhyming couplet, place space, where the other ones are all like the first and the third and the second and the fourth rhyme. So that's what I mean by the structure contributes to the meaning of the poem. And at the end, he's summing it up, saying that, we won't be put off, and yet we have to deal with whatever it is that comes our way. And then once we dealt with that, we're set off for something new. And man is always looking forward to achieving something. When I say man, of course, I mean humankind. Maybe I shouldn't use the word man. Okay, so that's a little summary of the poem. And the subtitle for that is To Hear Us Talk, which is interesting. Nature wants to see how we deal with things, and so we have that perennial battle between man and nature. Now that's the end of that particular poem, and discussion-wise. There's another poem that deals something similar to this, and just made me think of it, and it's called In Winter. And there's such a thing in poetry called diction. Now diction in speech is how you enunciate or pronounce words, articulate kind of thing. But in prose and poetry, in verse I should say, diction is the choice of words for effect. Now in this particular poem, In Winter, Frost sets up a almost again like in a tree falling across the wood. He sets up a battle between man and nature. All right, and this is a nice little poem that kind of flows right into the first poem. I hadn't thought of this before, but anyway, here's how it goes. In winter, in the woods alone, against the trees I go. I mark a maple for my own, and lay the maple low. At 4 o'clock I shoulder axe, and in the afterglow I link a line of shadowy tracks across the tinted snow. I see for nature no defeat in one tree's overthrow, nor for myself in my retreat for yet another blow. So the imagery in this is almost like a battle. Shouldering the axe like shouldering a rifle, against the trees, against the enemy. I mock a maple. That would be like marksmanship. He takes a bead on what he wants to shoot, in this case, knock down with an axe. So we have the imagery of a battle going on between man and nature. And in the second stanza, at 4 o'clock I shoulder axe, and in the afterglow, listen to this line. I link a line of shadowy tracks across the tinted snow. In winter, around 4 o'clock, it starts to get, dusk and dark, and the snow in the ground, in each footprint becomes a pool of darkness, like shadow. I link a line of shadowy tracks across the tinted snow, tinted with the afterglow of the red, in the sky, the sun setting. And then the last stanza, like in the last poem, where we have a summary of man versus nature, here he says, I see for nature no defeat. Nature didn't lose. It's got billions of trees. Nor for myself my retreat, another military word. All right, defeat, retreat. because I'll be back for yet another blow. In other words, I'll be back with my axe, and I'll continue. So if you consider it as a battle, nature didn't win, and man didn't win. It's just a continual battle between the forces of nature and man. So that's very much like the other poem, and I'm glad that came to my mind. So I'll read it again, and think of the imagery again. Both the imagery of what you are seeing and the imagery of what he wants you to think about as a battle or a war, with all the military terms he uses. In winter in the woods alone, against the trees I go. I mark a maple for my own, and lay the maple low. At 4 o'clock I shoulder axe, and in the afterglow I link a line of shadowy tracks across the tinted snow. I see for nature no defeat in one tree's overthrow, nor for myself in my retreat for yet another blow. Lovely little poem. Just one more point before I close here. I didn't mention about how smoothly the words flow, because he uses what is called alliteration. I think you know what that means. I link a line of shadowy tracks across the tinted snow, and then see for nature no defeat in one tree's overthrow, or for myself in my retreat for yet another blow. I mark a maple for my own. The 3 M's there. So, if I don't want to kill a dead horse, beat a dead horse, but you get the idea. The flow of the words is very, very smooth because of the way he has arranged them, and that's not an accident. So that shows you, his genius. He worked hard in writing poems. They didn't just come to him, oh, I gotta write this, I just thought of it. No, he has to come up with all of these beautiful images and arrange them so that they flow nicely. You have a rhyming scheme and a beauty of language. Okay, that's all.